Hello again, boys and girls, third graders. I hope you're managing through this time that we're in. And as I actually promised a couple of times back, I'm going to finish a wonderful book by friends of ours, Sherry Williamson from, remember, The Woodland Elves. I got about halfway through a while back, so I wanted to finish this today because I think this might be the last time as school is finished on May 8th. So here we go again. You know me, Neil Scott-Barbour, the English guy. So I'm going to show you first of all a picture and then explain it. We're on chapter 2 now. I'll try to let you see these better than I did last time. So this one, where we are, it's called the Acorn Competition. Fritz, Buddy, and Chip, remember the grandchildren, had a problem. They had searched all day long to find just one tiny home to help prove elf existence to their friends, and had not been able to find a single one. They trudged on, surrounded on all sides by the sounds of the woods. Chirping, twittering, and nibbling echoed around them, and the crystal-clear water of the brook babbled merrily. None of this made the boys very happy, however. "Where are they?" grumbled Fritz. "I don't know," mumbled Chip. Buddy simply sighed. Finding just one small elf cottage would have been all the evidence they needed, and would have made the elves so much easier to explain. However, today was apparently not the day to find any such home. Frustrated, they turned and headed back to the big house. Suddenly, with a loud thunk, an acorn fell from the tree, hitting Buddy right on the top of his head. "Ouch!" Buddy looked up at the tree, rubbing his head. The acorns kept falling, accurately hitting the top of each boy's head over and over. Chip, Buddy, and Fritz darted around under the trees, trying to avoid the acorns raining steadily down. The boys suddenly became aware of whispering and laughing coming from the tree branches above. "Oh, look!" Chip said, pointing to the foliage above. Tanglewood, Barleycrumb, and Beanpod hovered high in the treetops, holding acorns just waiting to be dropped. And there's the picture of, see? There they all are, the elves. "Hey!" exclaimed Buddy as another acorn whizzed past his head. Fritz started to climb up the tree. Within seconds, the elves disappeared into the foliage, leaving only the giggling sounds of their departure. It was not until that night in the treehouse that Barleycrumb admitted to the boys that they had caught the elves in the midst of an acorn competition.
"We take pride in dropping acorns on humans walking through their woods,"
Barleycrumb confessed, giggling. "Do you keep score?" Buddy asked.
"Of course," Barleycrumb answered. 1 point if an acorn hits the top of a head directly, 2 points if they knock a hat or cap off a human's head, and 3 points if the person rubs his or her head and cries out in surprise. "I won the competition today," he said proudly, "when my acorn knocked Chip's baseball cap off his head."
And to Barleycrumb's delight, it had also been his acorn that had caused Buddy to yell, "Ouch!" Chapter 3. This one is called The Best Medicine. Throughout the years, Grandmother maintained one rule that could not be broken. The elves must always remain outside. They were never allowed in the big house. That meant if fierce winds blew and clouds darkened the sky, the boys stayed inside and had no contact with the elves. If lightning flashed, the sky rumbled and giant raindrops smashed down to the earth. The brothers were bound to stay in the big house, and the elves remained outside, taking refuge in their well-hidden homes. There were no exceptions to the rule. None. Well, let's see, maybe just one. But here's a picture of the elves. See, they're outside the window. They can't get in. See that? So, as I say, there might be an exception. That summer, Buddy became ill and was confined to his bed for many days. Since he could not go outside, his brothers stayed inside with him. It was one for all and all for one. Chip was convinced that Tanglewood, Barleycrumb, and Beanpod could be just the remedy to cure Buddy. But he had to convince Grandmother to let the three elves in the house, just this once. "Oh, please, Grandmother," Chip begged. "Please, please." After giving it some thought, but without saying a word, Grandmother finally gave in. She went to the window and opened it. Here she is, opening the window. See that? There's a hand lifting the window up. "Well, I suppose Buddy could use some fresh air," she said loudly, in the direction of the little pairs of ears just outside the ledge, being careful to pretend that she didn't see the elves' delighted smiles or their eager faces. And then she walked away, forgetting to shut the window. Within seconds, the small friends tumbled in through the open window, all grins and twinkling eyes. What Grandmother could not have imagined, however, was that the elves would also bring many of their own friends with them. And here they all are. Here's Buddy. He's kind of in his bed, sick. And here's the other ones, trying to get it so you can see all the elves all over the place in his bedroom. You can count them if you have a chance. Anyway, there they all are, trying to make him feel better. Tanglewood, Barleycrumb, Beanpod, and their army of elfin friends happily tumbled into Buddy's room. Tiny but brave and kind at heart, they were eager to lend a hand to help Buddy get well. The laughter and happy chaos in the bedroom was such that Buddy was finally roused enough to sit up and look to see what on earth was going on. Then, for the first time in many days, Buddy smiled as he took in the joyful upheaval. The popcorn bowl on the side of Buddy's bed was alive with elves, stuffing their mouths with white puffy kernels. Elves buried themselves under Buddy's soft comforter, enjoying the feel of the downy feathers. Then they used that same blanket like a trampoline, triumphantly yelling out their names as they went higher and higher. Milkweed, jump! Finnegan, jump! Tinglepaw, high five! Suddenly music filled the room. Elves marched around the room, playing little instruments with even littler hands. The music made everyone smile and chuckle with delight, especially Buddy. I'm going to let you see that picture again because some of what I've just talked about you can see in the picture. You can see that. You see everything we've been talking about. Well, some of it. There's a little bit more to tell. Elves were coming from far and wide to climb in through the bedroom window. No one in the elf community wanted to miss out on the excitement of actually being inside a real house, to experience someone's life instead of just hearing about it was the moment they had waited for. It changed everything. They were trying on football helmets and baseball caps. They were sliding deep down into Buddy's shoes. Uncontrolled laughter came from the floor, where some elves had managed to make a tent under Buddy's underwear. Somehow, even amidst all the elfin clutter, Grandfather remained asleep in the rocker in the corner of the room. Tinglepaw and Finnegan used the opportunity to jump from the bed to the rocker and slurp Grandfather's large mug of hot chocolate and marshmallows while he snored peacefully. "Yum!" they exclaimed, happily pointing out each other's enormous white marshmallow mustaches. Oh, to be trusted enough to really be a part of someone's life, to know them, to care about them, to love them. And to be able to make a difference in their life. It was the most wonderful feeling in the world. Grandmother says that sometimes laughter is the best medicine of all. In this case, it was certainly true. I'm going to show you that picture one more time because we talked about some of the things at the end where you will be able to see them with trying on football helmets and the tent at the bottom of the bed and so forth. Wonderful, wonderful pictures, wonderful illustrations. And now we will move on to chapter 4, and it's called Hidden in Broad Daylight. Excuse me. The boys' cousins had eagerly waited for the day when they could travel to Grandmother's house and all be together in the one and only. Finally, the day came when Andy and Eve happily arrived at the big house, ready to share the remaining weeks of summer fun with the boys. Eve brought along her best friend, Hannah. Of course, the first thing they did was run out to the woods, casting their eyes to and fro in search of the small elfin faces they had heard so much about. Though they were hidden from view, Milkweed, Finnegan, and Tinklepaw were waiting and watching for the 3 new human friends, having already proclaimed themselves the children's protectors in the forest. And here they are, the boys and the cousins and the girls, coming along on the way to the woods. See that? And there's the forest on the other side, at least one tree in the forest. Except for a few occasional sightings, the children never saw their small friends in the daytime. Whirring noises, wee voices, or tiny giggles were the only indications that the elves were close by. In the sunshine, the children were rarely able to find them. The many layers of the forest made it difficult to search for something that didn't want to be seen. The children could only imagine where in the forest the elves lived, or what their homes looked like. Were they on the forest floor, or in the shrubs, or high in the branches? It became their goal to find the elves' homes before having to leave at the end of the summer. As the daytime search for any sign of an elf dwelling continued, the children made many interesting discoveries. It amazed them to think that people had probably walked through the forest many times, even taking pictures of what they thought was a natural part of the woods. If they had only looked a bit closer, they might have seen something more natural, but much less expected. The elves. And here we have them, searching away, trying to find where the elves are. In the woods. Chapter 5. The Nighttime Hayride. One night in the treehouse, Beanpod woke everyone up with his idea of nighttime fun, a midnight hayride. Earlier he had found a small wooden cart that appeared to be the perfect size for elves. All 6 children quickly and quietly followed the elves out into the large front yard. A wise old owl high in a tree kept hooting, "Toot-woo, woo," and hooting. He must have known something was about to happen. Beanpod had somehow convinced Koko the cat to be harnessed up to that small wooden cart. Meowing proudly, Koko was ready to charge into the night, pulling a wagon full of excited elves. Slowly she began moving. Around the yard went Koko. Around the yard went the cart full of elves. The hayride continued with much laughter from both the elves and the children, who sat on a tree stump, watching in amusement and amazement. But the harness was annoying Koko, and the cart, being so full of elves, became very heavy and difficult for her to pull. Now look at this picture. Look how many elves there are there. Look at all those elves. And Koko the cat. Lots of elves in that hayride. Wouldn't that be fun? Still, everything went smoothly until something alarmed Koko. Maybe it was a deer or a raccoon. Maybe it was a possum or a bat. Whatever it was, caused her to take off running as fast as she could. From that moment on, everything was a blur of motion. Koko was running so fast that the cart wheels were lifted off the ground. Elves were hanging on tightly, fearing for their lives. Some of them were even flying out of the cart. Nothing could stop Koko. And here you have them, falling out of the cart, the wheels spinning, and Koko going crazy. Without warning, she took an immediate turn as whatever she was causing and chasing darted off in a different direction. The cart got caught in the roots of a tree and tripped over. The harness snapped in half and Koko disappeared, chasing after some animal of the night. The children were all left standing alone by the light of the moon only. No Koko. She was running deep in the woods. No elves. They had vanished like magic. Only then did they see the lights in the big house go on and grandmother heading into the yard to see what all the commotion was about. Though it was a little difficult to explain, she understood. She always did. Chapter 6. This one is called Mr. Man in the Moon. After hearing the children's story of the midnight hayride, Grandmother decided to join the children in the treehouse for a small midnight snack of milk and cookies. After so much excitement, it did not take long for everyone to fall asleep. Well, most everyone. All of the elves except Beanpod had quietly returned to their spots in the one and only. Beanpod, however, was feeling a bit sad that the hayride had not turned out exactly like he had hoped. He climbed up to the crow's nest, looking at both humans and elves. Then he looked up in the sky at the beautiful full moon. He could clearly see Mr. Man in the Moon looking down at him. Beanpod thought he must be very lonely way up in the sky, all by himself. Thinking about Mr. Man in the Moon all alone made him so sad. Huge tears rolled down Beanpod's cheeks. Poor Beanpod, poor Mr. Man in the Moon. It was at that very moment that Beanpod opened his little mouth as wide as he could, and he began to sing. He sang to the moon with all his heart and soul. When he had finished, Mr. Man-in-the-Moon smiled his biggest smile back at him. Happy once again, Beanpot climbed quietly down out of the crow's nest and went to join the other elves in the forest. And there he is in the crow's nest singing at the Man-in-the-Moon. Chapter 7. One last acorn competition. Here's a picture of some big acorns. See those acorns? Big, big acorns. The morning that everyone had to leave Grandmother and Grandfather's house to go home, the one and only was still damp from the night's rain and had not yet been warmed by the morning sun. The 6 children walked slowly together down a path through the one and only as they searched for one last sign of elf life.
Beanpot,
they whispered. Barley Crumb,
Tanglewood, are you there?
Somewhere in the woods were the elves the children had lived with and loved, but they saw nothing of them. Suddenly, above them, there was a rustle of branches and leaves. Giggles came from somewhere high in the trees, and then the acorns came flying down. It's not known who won that day's competition. It was all for one and one for all. Probably the elves' way of saying goodbye for the summer, and it was perfect. Just look at all those acorns raining down, raining on top of the boys and the girls. Final chapter. This is called See You Next Summer. The morning mist drifted upward as the elves found their way deep into the forest, and the children found their way back home. The children did not find the homes of the elves that summer. The mystery had not been solved, and secrets were still yet to be uncovered. Somehow, though, it was still okay. The children didn't have to explain anything. They knew that the elves existed. Sometimes just knowing was enough. The first summer with the elves came and went so quickly. It was a journey into one of the last unexplored frontiers, a forest of magic and wonder, of miracles and joy, a forest where the woodland elves live. Somewhere from within the big house, Grandmother's voice could be heard softly sighing, I know the children will be visiting again soon. It would feel like a long time until the next summer when the children could continue their friendship with the woodland elves. As they each made their way back home, though, they smiled secret smiles, knowing the day would come eventually and the elves would be waiting. There they all are, on their way home. So that, friends, is the first of the number of books, I think it's 5 now, which Sherry Williamson, our good friend, the author, has written. And I'm going to show you a picture of her, a picture of the illustrator, and a picture of the composer, because we can do music with it. So there is Sherry Williamson, our friend. Here is the illustrator. There's the illustrator. And lastly, the composer of the music. So here is the back page of the book with lots of elves on it, and I hope you might be interested in hearing more of the Woodland Elves books at another time. Thank you for this opportunity to read to you, and I hope I can come back, maybe in the fall, and actually do some live presentations like we used to do before we had to be sheltering at home in quarantine. Hope you're all doing well, and that in some way or other you're having fun as well as schoolwork, but schoolwork's over real soon. So have fun, do new things, be creative, love one another, stay safe and healthy during the coming summer. Bye from me. See you next time. Bye-bye.